Hey, what's up, everybody? So today I'm going to give you 5 tips to increase your situational awareness so that you're more prepared to respond if you find yourself in an active shooter situation. Tip number 1, believe that it can definitely happen where you work, where you shop, where you learn, where you worship, and where you socialize. So mass shootings have unfortunately become commonplace in our society. But for whatever reason, people are still shocked when they occur. The problem with not believing that it can happen to you is that you rob yourself of the mental preparedness that you'll need to increase your chances of survival. This is way before the run, the hide, and the fight, or what we call engage here at AADP. I'm talking about being mentally prepared and living your life in a way that you're never caught off guard or startled by an event that adversely affects your ability to respond accordingly. When you've actually thought about the unthinkable happening, you'll be in a much better position to respond in a crisis, not just react to it. Number 2, mentally rehearse those, if this happens, I'm doing this. If that happens, I'm doing that types of scenarios in your mind everywhere you go. This includes the gym, at the movies, the grocery store, the doctor's office, at work, or wherever you go. You have to create those conditional scripts in your mind. If the first time you've ever thought about a situation is when you're actually in it, then you're at a disadvantage. You should always be visualizing and rehearsal survival scenarios in your mind. Like, okay, if this happens, I'm going to do this. If this happens like this, then I want to take this action. This rehearsal preps your mind and allows you to modulate the suddenness and the panic and the disbelief and the shock that you may feel in the event something happens. The more you can reduce those reactionary feelings, the more you can spend that energy and that time collecting information and actually responding. Rehearsing survival strategies in your mind is particularly important if you spend a lot of time in facilities and locations that are considered soft targets. Soft target areas are generally places used by the public in large numbers that are very difficult to secure, such as shopping malls and sporting arenas. They can also be considered as places that lack security personnel or security systems. Active shooters tend to pick soft targets because they're typically looking to harm as many people as they can with the least resistance as possible. So again, rehearsing survival options in your mind is super important. Number 3, reduce the number of distractions while you're in the public and at work. How can you respond to gunfire, screams, or respond to an alert if you're wearing headphones and don't even hear it? Some of us are on the train and so absorbed in our books and our phones that Jesus himself could come sit next to us and we'd never even know it. We put ourselves at a disadvantage when we occupy the senses that we'll need in a crisis with other non-essential things. Distractions such as cell phones and books and earbuds, or even having lengthy conversations during our morning or our evening commute can reduce your level of awareness. If you're taking public transportation, for an example, it's extremely difficult to observe strange behaviors or notice someone getting on the bus with what could possibly be a bag with rifles in it when we're not paying attention to what it is or who is around us. Now, of course, we can't stereotype or profile people based on how they look, but we can be aware of their presence and then go back to tip number 2 and start mapping out those, if this happens, I'll do this, situations in your mind. But if you absolutely must listen to your music on the train or while you're working out at the gym, at least take one ear out so that you can hear things. Another distraction that many people don't talk about is public intoxication or being under the influence of anything that impairs our judgment while we're out. Unfortunately, we have much more than DUIs and getting home safely to be concerned about these days. Being inebriated or incapacitated to the point that you can't possibly be tuned in to what's around you is certainly not a good idea. So we've all heard of run, hide, and fight, right? Of course. It's the FEMA model and probably the most popular active shooter response protocol. But what many people don't realize is that each of those words are kinesthetic in nature and require a certain level of physicality. So tip number 4 is get physically prepared. I firmly believe that not enough emphasis is placed on taking care of ourselves as it pertains to active shooter preparedness. Having basic knowledge, being aware of your surroundings, and all that is great, but there's a certain level of physicality that's involved with surviving too. Now don't go getting discouraged or feel like you need to get a gym membership or start training like an Olympic athlete. I'm just saying that it's difficult to run fast or get up and down stairs or even be confident that you can do so when you haven't ran in years. It's difficult to move furniture for barricading purposes if you don't have much strength. It's kind of hard to hide behind things or get concealed in spaces if you have difficulty squatting, for an example. In our active assailant defense program, we teach an option-based response protocol, which means how you respond is all determined by the options you're presented with. One of those considerations is your physical ability and readiness. I'm not just talking about how much you weigh or whether or not you're in shape. You may be in great condition, but at that moment, you may be compromised by a recent injury or something. All these things play a role in how you see yourself responding. So I'm saying, just as we strengthen our minds with knowledge, we must also strengthen our bodies and exercise with nutrition so that it responds and can actually do what we need it to do when we need it most. One of the things I do to maintain a high CSP, or constant state of preparedness, from a physical aspect, is to do short stretching exercises throughout my day so that my body is always warm and my muscles are elasticized and ready for sudden movement. By doing so, I can limit or reduce the risk of injury, especially as I get older. Health and wellness is obviously important in all areas of life. Same is true with active shooter preparedness. Number 5, pay more attention to the spaces you spend time in. Many of us find ourselves in areas that we spend a great amount of time in, but we know very little about the space itself. It might be a place where we worked for years, but never noticed or tried to access a certain door that we see all the time, but no one has ever opened it or has the key to it. Or perhaps a window that could potentially be a good emergency egress option, but nobody knows it because it's covered by curtains. Are you at a gathering inside of a venue with only one way in and one way out? Or does it have multiple exits? What about the doors? Which way do they open? Are there rooms to barricade in if running isn't an option? Or what would you do if the threat originated from within the space itself? Now, of course, you are not expected to do a facility's risk assessment inspection the next time you go out to a restaurant or walk around and inspect the banquet hall at the next wedding that you're invited to. That would be a bit over the top, right? Of course. However, the next time you go to work, it may not be a bad idea to take a different way to your office if you can, or maybe take the stairs instead of the elevator. Identify multiple route options that you can possibly take and where you typically are throughout the day in relation to those spaces. Know where the dead end areas are versus the good spaces to hide or barricade yourself in. The next time you go out to dinner with friends or to a sports bar, be mindful of the access points, the emergency exits, where the balcony area is if they have one. If you're in a venue with multiple floors, remember what level you're on and where the elevator is and where the stairs are. Things like that. Thank you for your viewership. I am Morris with the Active Assailant Defense Program, and I hope you found value in the top 5 ways to elevate your situational awareness and increase your overall state of preparedness. If you have any ideas on how we can increase our situational awareness or have a higher state of preparedness, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Also, please reach out to us online if you're interested in taking our active shooter preparedness course or scheduling a training for your organization.